blind spot exploration, I want to talk about ecological relationships and the relationship of a sick system. Now, let's back up a little moment and look at what sick is. Sick is a synonym for dis-ease. When something becomes asymmetrical, you have the sphere as the easiest, most graceful shape known to human beings. It takes the least effort to move a sphere, to spin, the energy is perfectly distributed within a sphere. The sphere is synonymous with wholeness. Wholeness synonymous with health. When you have something that is spherical, you have the entire system, which in a dualistic paradigm, in a dualistic dimension such as our own, you have black and you have white. So the entire system is black, white, and all the colors in between. Now you've got the sphere. When you are in a dualistic system, you have within the instrument of the human heart the entire spectrum of human experience. You don't get an instrument that cannot read, if it's a thermometer, it really reads down to 0. If it's a digital thermometer, it'll read, infinite degrees below 0, infinite degrees above 0. It's a circle. Now, circles, if we go into movement and bicycles, are graceful. That's why we have wheels and bicycles. A 360-degree, perfectly symmetrical bicycle wheel will move with less friction than anything else. And so sickness, dis-ease, comes when that circle, when that sphere becomes elongated into an asymmetrical shape. Driving a watermelon is much more difficult than a bicycle wheel. Now, the thing is, if you are in a sick system, if you are in a diseased system where the ease has been removed and replaced with asymmetrical difficulty, you have a cyclic system. If you are driving a bicycle that is bracketed with a watermelon instead of a wheel, there's going to be a very difficult up cycle, then a pivoting grace moment where it's really easy, it's right up the top, and then it's going to crash down the other side because you're dealing with a cucumber type shape, a watermelon shape. So it's going to have a cycle of up and down and up and down. And it's going to be very difficult for it to go up, and it's going to be difficult to stop. The more asymmetrical you become, a line being, the extreme difference of the circle, you have the line, you have the circle, it takes more and more energy to move forward with a more and more asymmetrical all the way into the line. And in fact, you could literally, you'd spend an enormous amount of energy, and it'd be a very bumpy ride if your bicycles were sticks. Your wheels were sticks, and you'd chunk and chunk and chunk, and nobody would ride a bicycle. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's dis-easy. It's diseased. When you are in a diseased system, when you are in an asymmetrical system, that is ecological in nature, meaning you are a part of the system is fueled on you. There is an interdependency. Every culture, the root word cult, every culture is born out of this interdependency between the individual and the collective. The individual feeds and reinforces the collective shapes the individual. The collective shapes the individual by issuing asymmetrical punishment and reward symbols and signals. So every human being needs, if we look at Abraham Maslow's excellent work on hierarchy of needs, every human being needs to survive. Then they need, right after that, the security, the sense, okay, fine, I'm surviving. But if, you've just been given enough money to pay the rent, and you've no idea why you've been given the money, you've no idea if anyone else will give you any money, and you don't have a job, you are not feeling wonderful. You've got like 30 days before you're evicted. It's in survival. So the next step is security. I'm confident that I've got income coming in, that I can survive. I can buy my food. I can buy my rent. I can buy my car, my bicycle. I can survive. Right after this, we need to feel like we belong. Love and belonging, the third of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, kicks in immediately. Once we are secure in our survival, we need to know that we belong. We need to know that our love matters. That's what helps us feel like we belong. When we love and it means nothing, there's no sense of belonging. There's no sense of value. There's no sense of connectedness. The connectedness comes when I give love and it really makes a difference. When you smile, when you're excited, when your life improves because I love you. When my life improves because you love me, that's when we know we belong. We are connected, that the energy exchange matters. The dissonance of this being, I need you, I want you, I'm attracted to you, I would do anything for you. And the only thing you want me to do for you is disappear, is to dissolve, is to go away. Or my greatest need is to make you happy. And what makes you most happy is for me to disappear, to become invisible, to cease to exist. You have an asymmetry. You have pain. You have extraordinary human suffering in the asymmetry. It's very thin on this dimension, totally long in the other. This is what happens when you have imbalances of power. You take a spherical shape in which power is distributed equally, and you compress it into a cantaloupe, watermelon, cucumber shape. Now, one party has all the power and the other has none. This is a recipe for helplessness, for loneliness, particularly when that power asymmetry is then turned against the person in that same dynamic with the element of love, where what would bring me the greatest joy is your happiness, a very big gift, and your greatest happiness is for me to disappear, a very small gift. And when that is leveraged, if you really loved me, you'd kill yourself. That's the extreme line where the one is so lost, meaning the boundary has blurred. The boundary is blurred, and I feel a part of you. And the other is so dissociated that their experience is, you have nothing to do with me, and I'm not the slightest bit affected whether you live or die, but I am affected by you bothering me, so disappear. So you have this extreme dis-ease that comes from the extreme asymmetry of power, asymmetry of empathy, asymmetry of love, asymmetry of trust. I trust you, I don't trust you at all, and I'm not trustworthy. Asymmetry. you have dis-ease. So if we understand that this movement, that grace and momentum and evolution is moving towards the sphere where transparency is equal, where power is equal, where trust and trustworthiness are equal, where partnering is equal. Let's build a house together. And that doesn't mean that you show up on a weekend with 1 2x4 and a hammer and pound a few nails and say, I'm done, and contribute $5. And someone else shows up 8 hours a day, day in and day out, contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we built a house together. That doesn't feel very good, particularly when there's an asymmetry between I contributed 2% to the house building project, but I want 80% of the deference. I want to have my paintings and my this, and your taste doesn't matter because it's not cool, of course, as defined by me. So we have asymmetry. So we have this this dynamic, and one of the funny things that happens for me in these videos at times is there's a part of me that just gets lost. The mindscape is so big. And usually some little trigger will come along and I'll actually find my way back to the central architecture. So I took a detour in sickness and disease and wholeness and symmetry. And I may actually have to stop this video to remember where I was going. And since I don't remember and I've lost it for now 2 minutes, I may not have mentioned it, where I was going. So let me see. Okay, I've got it. The relationship between a sick system, a diseased system, and an individual that is integrated and affected in the system in Maslow's hierarchy of needs creates an environment where, because the system, the ecology, the environment, in this case we're looking at human cultures and Western culture in particular as an American male, where human culture is asymmetrical. Now, one of the interesting side notes is that systems become asymmetrical when they're self-referencing. A self-referencing thing simply means that I say 1 + 1 = 5. I say I'm a good person. I say that I always speak the truth. Therefore, if I said 1 + 1 = 5, it must equal 5. And because it does equal 5, therefore, when we need 5, we need to add 1 + 1, and we'll get 5. Now, this is a self-referencing system. There's no way out of that unless I introduce something outside the system. Now, this would be a bit of data. Now, if I say 1 + 1 = 5, and I don't reference myself, I reference some data, I take this object and I count it up and I say, no, it doesn't. That's not 5. That's 1 and 1, that's 1, 2. And so we've got a break in the system. Now 1 + 1 is not equaling 5. Now that means that I don't always tell the truth, etc., because we're referencing something bigger than the self. Now, cultures do this all the time. They are self-referential. Take the United States, where being unnormal is the highest crime. Now, it is normal in the United States to put on a show of individuality. That's normal. So if you dye your hair blue and you're 18-year-old, that's understandable. If as an 18-year-old male you start showing empathy and kindness, something's a little bit off. That's not normal within the United States. The rebelliousness of teenagers, normal. And so when we have this self-referencing system, the question is not a question that leads us outside of the system, because a question that leads us outside of the system is a question such as how much energy is being spent in this moment. Like, let's add up all the energy in this room. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different 45-watt lights. Okay, that's 300 watts of light. We have $1,000 Samsung Note 8. We have a $20 microphone just here. We have a stand. We have carpeting. We have a concrete wall behind here. We have a let's say we've got $30,000 tied up in this moment. This moment is enabled by $30,000. And I'm talking about this. And so we're looking at what? 20 minutes of time. So we've got 20 units of time. We've got 300 watts. We've got $30,000. We have thoughts concentrated in just this way. We've got a tie-up of energy. Now, an intelligent, non-referential question is, if we could liquefy that $30,000, if we could liquefy that 300 watts, if we could liquefy the time and reallocate that time, is there any way that we could create massive amounts of well-being as an individual, as a community, as a species, with that same expenditure? Is there a way that by dancing with energy and redesigning it outside of the cultural reference point, because of course there's no way to do it within the cultural reference point, that's what keeps it in, because sure, you have to have houses that meet code. Why? Well, you just have to have that, and you have to, in Marin County, spend $1 million on a house. Well, you just have to do that, and if you're going to make a video, you've got to have good sound quality. So there's all these things that are referencing the cultural norms for Western videos in this particular example. But what if we don't reference those norms? What if we say that we have 30 minutes and the use of $30,000 for 30 minutes to create massive amounts of well-being? What can we come up with? How good is our thinking? Do we even have the software to process that equation? Is it rusty? Is it crisp? How many new and innovative responses to that question can we create right off the bat? Do you pause the button in a passive media consumption culture and sit down and write down 10 things? If so, do any of them measure up? Do you have a metric? Do you have the software? Has this cult downloaded a software in your brain, in school or otherwise, that allows you to analyze the culture itself, which is usually, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. The culture likes to be in the background, moving everything, but nobody look at the culture. See, because the culture is this little weak old man pulling little strings, hoping nobody's going to figure out that, there's no roaring wizardry. The culture is this behind-the-scenes figure that is shaping the life of everyone else and appearing impervious and grandiose, but literally can vanish simply by people taking back and internalizing, for example, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs: survival, security, love, and belonging. You see, because this is how a culture hooks its people, one after another, is as each person is born into the world. And let's say you start making, lovely, soft noises, ooh, and you find this makes you very happy. But your parents are not happy about this. They say, this is not that kind of culture. No. You may be able to be off in dreamland saying 3 notes in octaves and this and that and the other, and you may enjoy moving around. But if you're an 8-year-old boy, there's all kinds of disastrous things that is going to happen. People are going to tease you. Then they're going to humiliate you because they're teasing you. Then there's going to be bullies that do this, and your teacher's going to call you disruptive, and your principal is going to kick you out of school, and then nobody's going to hire you, and then we're going to look like idiots, and then we're going to wish you'd never been born, and da-da-da-da-da, and your whole world is going to come to an end because you enjoy making sounds and movements that bring you joy, that don't take any money, that don't require an education, that just have a nice feeling, that turn sound into well-being, that turn movement into well-being more efficiently than honey, did you see that on the news? Oh, that doesn't look good. No, that doesn't look good. Come, watch this. This is miserable. Watch it. It's more effective at turning energy into well-being. It's like, how do we build these things up? Well, you've got to be informed. Why? Why do you have to be informed? Well, you've got to be. Because all important people are informed, says the culture. Well, why? It's like, so you watch the news and then you donate to those homeless children? No. I don't donate to those homeless. You watch the news and you go out and vote? No, I don't bother voting. You watch the news and you write to your congressperson? No, I don't do that. I just sit there and feel bad. That's all I do. And that's a sign of a mature. You see, it doesn't hold up. It's not intelligent. Intelligence is a responsive ecological framework that is actively correlating energy expenditure with well-being. Well-being and pain both being contagious viruses, radiating out this American life by accident. No, this emotional life, an accidental study about feelings in a culture that doesn't talk about feelings. So you have to have accidental studies. They study something else, and then it just turns up accidentally that they've got decades of research on 60,000 people dealing with their emotions, so they learn that emotions are contagious, something that you could have told them yourself if you were in a culture that asked you, because when you walk in and everyone's moaning and complaining and depressed and irritating and you can't get a smile out of anyone, you feel worse too. You've just caught their disease. When you go into a room and people are engaging and smiling and they're really genuinely happy, there's an impulse to be infected with some of that. It's so nice to be in a world and around people that are enjoying themselves. You could have told them, but they didn't ask. You see, that's part of the culture. So when you are in an asymmetrical culture, there will be, of course, more pain. It takes a lot of energy to pedal a watermelon-wheeled bicycle. It just takes a lot of energy, particularly going uphill. But you will be asymmetrically rewarded for responding to this asymmetry. Now, the biggest investors, the most successful people in history are contrarians in the investment world. They are the people that hold on to large amounts of cash, and when there's a massive stock market crash and everyone is convinced that the whole world is coming to an end, and so they all sell their stocks. This is the asymmetry. So this is, everyone up, everyone's euphoric, and then everyone's depressed. Now, you will be rewarded socially for conforming. You'll be rewarded socially. Don't buy stocks. This is going to be the end. This is going to be the end. Don't do it. So socially, you're rewarded. So if you need your love and belonging, you're going to, of course, follow the up craze and then follow the down craze, and this is how large percentages of people lose money, particularly if they buy high and sell low, which is the signature of the amateur investor. So what I'm illustrating is that when you are in a sick system, when you are in an asymmetrical system, you will be socially rewarded for conformity, but technically punished for the asymmetry created by conformity. Now, in some situations like stocks, you have a Warren Buffett or a Rockefeller or that, or Templeton that buy low and sell high, meaning they are a minority, and they are both the balancers of the system. They're being, in this case, rewarded technically. See, the technical world rewards you for symmetry. Investing, you focus only on the upside potential and don't cover your losses. You read a nice book like some of Branson's books on starting Virgin Airlines. Protect the downside. You see, he started Virgin Airlines, and it was a bold, innovative, and very risky proposition. But he did it on the basis that he could return the jets in the first number of months if it wasn't working out. So he didn't put out hundreds of millions of dollars. He leased on the basis that he could return the jets if it didn't work out. And on that basis, there was huge upside potential and very little downside potential. This is a symmetrical examination of the proposition. You look at the downside and you look at the upside, and you look for those situations that have a higher upside than downside based on the asymmetries in your environment, in your context at the time. Now, in a culture such as ours, for example, one of the deep asymmetries is the left brain, right brain imbalance. You have a overdeveloped left brain. And this, by the way, is already out of date. Science likes to pretend that it's, this above it all paradigm. But science itself, like every other religion, is constantly changing. First, margarine is the best thing you can possibly imagine, then it's terrible again. Then there's breast implants that are wonderful and don't harm you, and then they do. And then there's, the pill that's terrible and going to send you to hell. Then it doesn't do anything at all. Then it seems to have these, excess risks for this and this, but then it has benefits to this. And, it's always changing. It's an evolving story that is spun for political purposes as much as anything else is spun for. In fact, it's the scientific paradigm is the most potent paradigm for manipulating energy expenditure and people because people believe it. When everyone believed the Catholic Church would send you to hell if you did not bow this, give 10% of your money to them, and throw stones at your gay neighbors and all that. When everyone believed that you had to go rape and pillage savages, people who actually knew how to get on with the environment and could have educated us if we'd been educated ourselves enough to understand that we needed an education You see, it's very difficult when you have extreme asymmetries in ignorance. You often have barbaric behavior that is so ignorant and barbaric, it does not understand the value of what it is exterminating for several centuries until it's like, oh yes, the Indians could have taught us about sustainability. We've just killed them all. So now they can't. So now, several hundred years after killing them, we can realize they had something to teach us. We just didn't know enough at the time to know that we didn't know. So while they knew they had things to teach us, we didn't know enough to value what they had to say when they knew, and so there's you have this, you have so many people on this planet that know something's off, but another group of people, often the dominant group of people in power, do not know enough to know that they don't know, and therefore do not know enough to know that somebody else does know, and so they don't ask. And so, huge sheets of resources just slide off the table and, crash into oblivion because we don't know enough to know that we don't know. If you haven't grasped it, 99.9% of all the information out there is not only not known, we don't even know that we don't know it. We hang on and hang out in this tiny little thread of 0.011, 0.001% of knowledge that we know enough to know that we know. We just don't know enough to know that we don't know the rest. And in this situation, we can be rewarded for becoming more and more unhealthy by people who don't know enough to know that they're unhealthy, that the culture is unhealthy, but who do know enough, or think they do, to suggest that conformity matters. In this situation, generation after generation is bludgeoned, literally traumatized. The number of children screaming and, around the first day of school, I don't like this isn't right. Nothing's right. But the parent knows with so much certainty it couldn't possibly be true that they're sending their kid to learn irrelevant information inefficiently in a sociopathic setting. It just could not be, because we're self-referential. Because education, we've decided in the left linear brain thinking, is good. Then we've decided this is education, therefore it must be good. And we don't even involve the scientific method. You see, because we do actually find that people who do rote memory, who want to please the authority figure, who study and use massive amounts of discipline to do the things and excel in the areas that this cult of a culture values, do very well in the culture. But they don't do very well in terms of efficient energy expenditure. For example, the highest degreed individuals, people with three PhD, 3 doctorates of this, that, and the other, are statistically less happy than people with an average education, and often tribal people. I don't know if you've traveled around the world at all to spend time with the presence of the innocent feminine. The warmth, the presence, their minds are not on how they look. Their minds are not on what they're going to look like on camera. Their minds are not on tomorrow for the rent they don't have to pay. Their minds are not on the past and how ashamed. They are in the present. And the first thing a Westerner will do when they get their hands on is explain to these very present beautiful people, how they've got it all wrong. That the only reason they're happy is that they don't know enough to be miserable like the rest of us. And that if they will just abandon this and abandon that and don't look at that and instead pay attention, then they can know how backward they are. Once they know how backward they are, then they can get an education. The education will teach them about all the material things they should have. And once they get that, it will not be enough, because we'll teach them that it's never enough. And then they can be unhappy, like us, consuming 90% more resources than they were before when they were happy. It's like that wonderful story about the entrepreneur who meets the fisherman. Successful entrepreneur, probably from America, goes to a lovely beach on his 2 weeks of scarce vacation. And it bothers him, because it's so inefficient. There's this nice native person out fishing, catching 3 or 4 fish for his family, enjoying the afternoon, goes home, roasts it in his family. Well, this doesn't make any sense to our entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur goes over to the fisherman, and he says, you're missing a big opportunity here. Well, what? He doesn't understand. He's happy with his fish. He's enjoying his beach walk. So you're missing a big opportunity. He said, look, if you're catching 5 fish in an afternoon, just think if you had 3 or 4 fishing rods, all, doing this and that and the other. It's like, well, why would I want that? I have enough, He says, no. If you had 3 or 4 fishing rods, you could catch 3 or 4 times more fish. Well, why would I want to do that? Because then you could take the fish to market and you could sell the fish. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, then you could take the money and you could buy a fleet of boats, every year another boat, etc. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, then you could be working, dawn to midnight, managing your fleet of boats. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, then you could get an education. And why would I want to do that? Well, then you could get a job making more money than fishing. Yeah, it says, well, like what? Well, you could anything. You could be a stockbroker. You could work in a little cubicle. You could do this. And why would I want to do that? Well, then you could make lots of money. And it's like, well, why would you want to do that? Well, then you can retire. You can retire early if you're really successful. And why would I want to do that? Well, once you're retired, you can do whatever you want. He said I could come to the beach in the afternoon and enjoy the sunset and fish quietly and go home and enjoy the... Yes, you could do all that. It's like, well, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm enjoying my family. I'm fishing. I'm at the beach. And none of that other stuff sounds very fun. And the Westerner says, you just don't get it. I've got to go. I've got to go back to, because one of these days I'm going to be able to retire. I'm going to just do whatever I want and just hang out on these beaches as much as I want. Got to go, you see? We don't get the insanity. Because when we get so self-referential, the question is not, are we doing what's intelligent for our well-being, for ourselves or our family? And in fact, it's very difficult to find an urban area where the quality of presence, the quality of the sound, the quality of the smells, the quality of the presence, the quality of abundance, abundance in time, abundance of emotion, abundance of reflection, abundance of spontaneity. It's very difficult to find an urban area, where the average person who is consuming for all, they've got telephone wires to watch. They've got advertisements on billboards. They've got cars going by interrupting them with different noise channels going on. They hear their neighbor just screaming over here about this. They hear the police sirens going by here. They've got 500 to 1,000% more noise pollution. They've got 1,000% more visual pollution. They've got 1,000% more chemicals in the air. The water is less fresh. Chlorine, fluoride, an off taste. The food, the McDonald's or whatever, is not as enlivening. The thoughts they're thinking are not as present and in the moment. Oh, there's Trump again doing this. Oh. And the amount of resources being consumed for this degraded environment, which requires constant adrenaline addiction to supersede, to transcend the misery of the senses. The absence of touch and warmth, the absence of deep contact, the bombardment of thousands of messages. You don't matter, except if you buy this. You create a culture where you don't exist, where you are a stranger 99.9% of the time. You don't matter. 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 Oh, you matter a little bit here and there, or at least enough to pretend that you matter. Oh, sir, you would look so nice in that jacket. You matter for a little minute while you consume something. You matter to the commission of the salesperson. In this kind of a culture, there's absolute soul agony. But it's numb. In a culture that doesn't examine soul, that doesn't know what the word means. Frankly, I didn't either until quite recently. I didn't know what it felt like. I didn't know what soul pain was. Because when it came up as a child, I was told to push it away. I was told that good boys don't talk about that, don't feel those things. I was told that good boys in this culture take their soul and put it away, wrap it up and hide it, and apologize for the few moments it sticks out here and there to remind us that we're off course. In an unhealthy system, we are rewarded by doing unhealthy things. In a chauvinistic system where the feminine is degraded in both men and women, but even more so in men. There's nothing more humiliating, shaming, devaluing than calling a man a pussy, meaning he has empathy, meaning he is in touch with his feelings, meaning he's feminine. Nothing more degrading in a chauvinistic culture, you see, but that's the difference between the technology of mathematics, which rewards symmetry. If you take cultural references out of it and you have one bicycle trying to win a race that has watermelon wheels and the other has a sphere, the sphere will win. But in a cultural paradigm, it's not held to these scientific tenets. It's held to politics. And politics is the opposite in many ways of science. Politics is catering to the ignorance, the fears of the majority. If you want to get elected, plug into people's ignorance and fear, and then aggravate it, and then try and appease it. If you want to win a scientific race, you educate the ignorance of the majority by nuanced comparison of every different mode of culture. You look at a multiracial culture, and you look at a monoculture. You look in nature. What happens if you just grow corn on a crop for 30 years, in a field as one crop, a monoculture, and what happens if you grow in an organic garden? See, nature is scientific. The garden wins. The end of 30 years, you've got all kinds of microbial activity. You've got worms, you've got more topsoil, you've got a diverse number of crops. And if you have something like the Irish potato famine, and you've got 100 different vegetables all growing, only one dies out. The other crops are still good because the virus that wipes out the potatoes doesn't wipe out the pumpkins, doesn't wipe out the tomatoes, doesn't wipe out the basil. So nature rewards symmetry, ecology. Business or humanity, and cult thinking rewards asymmetry. The bank likes the 1,000 rows of corn because the bank isn't interested in growing an ecology, because the bank is not part of a scientific ecology. It's a figment of cultural imagination that is self-referential. Well, we've got to have banks so that we can fund things that people wouldn't otherwise want to do. Well, why do them then? Well, they've got to do them because we've got to be civilized. Well, why be civilized then? It's that story, you see, and it all breaks down at some point. When we look at the vast amounts of energy we spend conforming to a system that doesn't work. And the trick is to evaluate the system before we choose to conform to it, and to evaluate, because in a sick system, you need to become sick to survive to a certain degree if you are in an interdependent system on people. It doesn't matter if suits are uncomfortable, woolly, and hot in a hot Mediterranean country. If you can't transact any business with anyone unless you're wearing a suit, you've got to be an idiot like they are, because they're too idiotic to understand that they're idiotic. You see, if they were intelligent, they would say, wow, you're showing up in a nice white silk thing. Why didn't I think of that? Let's all change and do the intelligent thing. See, this is intelligence. But we're not dealing with intelligence. We're dealing with cults. So you show up in a flowing silk gown, particularly as a guy, in one of these stuffy Western business cultures, and they won't talk to you because they're too dumb to know that they're dumb. They're too bigoted to know that they're bigoted. So you fail for doing the intelligent thing. It is essential to make this discernment on an objective level. The objective levels are several things. How efficiently does a culture turn resources into well-being? You go to England, I lived there for 4 years, and you add up the amount of carbon spent per person, the amount of garbage generated per person, the amount of gasoline spent per person, the amount of plastic thrown, the amount of pollution, the amount of money spent, the amount of hours grinding away and stuff and this, and then you measure the units of well-being. How vital is this body as a population? How enthusiastic is this body as a population? How self-loving? How healthy? How happy to be alive? How generous? How kind? How connected? How empathic is this culture? And then you go to another culture, Denmark or Thailand or something, and you measure how much energy are these people generating and spending to get this unit of happiness. and you will tell how intelligent the culture is. The trouble is, regardless of how idiotic or intelligent a culture is, cultures are typically self-referencing. So they don't say, I'm an idiot because I could just do what they're doing over there and be 3 times happier with less money and less expense. That would be intelligent. They don't do it. They say, nobody's going to take away our cultural identity. Well, if it's a fucked up cultural identity, what an idiot. You see, but that's the trouble. You see, cultures breed idiocy. They breed a lack of thinking. So if they say, well, no one's going to, take away my right to get fat, being lonely, and spending vast amounts of money to do it, because that's my right. And our culture says that our rights are more important than what? Happiness? Yeah, anything. Yeah. And this is the traditional thing. We do eat potato chips around here. And we do sit and watch sitcoms, until we fall asleep at 4 a.m. That's what we do. So, go away. Or we run manically around here, looking totally fit and doing this and that until our knees don't work, and then we don't complain about it because we're positive. Whatever it is, that's what we do around here. And we're not going to reference all the choices. So you have insanity. You have a self-referencing insanity where we're spending vast amounts of energy to be more unhappy than we could spending less. So you have to have that objective metric. It's not hard to do. You just visit 20 countries, ask people how much do you love yourself, how much do you love your life, notice how their bodies are behaving, notice their facial expressions, this and that, count up the money and energy spent. You compare them. Now, cults, being largely self-referential, tend to win or lose on this metric by luck. But you can evaluate it with an intelligent metric. How efficiently do you turn energy into well-being? And why? This is the fascinating thing. Very, very fascinating. You take the United States, where around me there are probably 10,000 very, very miserable people within a short distance, living, let's just say an average of a 500,000. Anyway, they're living in $1 million houses. And you ask these people, would you come to a smiling party? No, that's not me. And the thing is, it's not that this wouldn't make me happy. It's that I define myself as my cult. And so I'm not going to do it. And would you talk about your dreams, your peak dream for the next 10 years? Well, I don't know you. Well, I know you don't know me, but you'll know me a little bit more if we talk about that. No, I'm not going to do that. And you realize that there are graceful doorways out of mediocrity and misery all around. There's just a very big price to pay in a cult. And that is to stop being self-referencing and be scientifically referencing a value such as well-being, such as vitality, such as wholeness, such as grace. Soon as you reference something outside the system doesn't make any sense. If you keep the eyes so tuned on just here, all you have to do is say, well, I'm not going to look over there because, why? Because it's not here. And I look here. Well, over there it's more beautiful. Yeah, but I look here. That's who I am. I look here. Well, why? Because that's what I do. Because I'm an American. It's very interesting. There's a big view out there. And yet it is such a transformative moment to unveil and unpack a culture and see oneself distinct, to risk giving up the sense of love and belonging, of familiarity, of survival and security in a cult that as an infant threatened to kill us for doing just that. And yet, what nearly killed us as infants and kept us alive by conforming to becomes the opposite. We can step out of that and realize that now it's the cult that's killing us for conforming to it, killing the planet, killing various peoples. It's killing our family, our well-being, our vitality, our enthusiasm. Anyway, this has been fun.